Fortitude requires the ability to tolerate discomfort or to tolerate ambiguity in ways that at least maybe my generation loves to get out from underneath. And probably even younger generations, it's like, ooh, that doesn't feel good. I'm not going to do it at all. No one's going to make me.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Memoria Press.
I'm not going to eat for a while because I did not feel good last night and this morning. And I woke up this morning thinking, I wonder if it was because of the half a bag of potato chips that I ate. Because my wife is gone. I didn't want to bother.
With dinner? That was your dinner?
That is such a bachelor thing to do, Martin.
You need an actual meal.
I ate half a bag, big bag of potato chips and watched a Hallmark movie.
Oh,
So-
God.
Wow.
Okay. Well, I can't wait to hear what tonight is.
Yeah, who knows?
I know.
I think I'm not going to eat for another 3 weeks.
No, I think you need an actual food in your stomach.
Oh.
Let's go buy a pack of hot dogs and throw them
No,
in the
not hot
microwave.
dogs. No.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Aboud, and I am here with our Core 4 team, Martin, Tanya, and Paul. Welcome back, everybody.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, I feel like the energy is good today.
Oh, do you?
We've been
I feel-
beforehand, and we're ready to go.
Yeah.
I'm glad she's so up.
Yeah. I'm not feeling that way, but
Oh, well, join me, Paul.
I will.
Well, today we're going to get updates on what everybody's reading, and then we're going to dive into a literary theme. We're talking about Fortitude today, and I'm excited because I think it's particularly compelling to look at characters with fortitude. I don't know about you, but lately I've read some like more modern books with characters that have no fortitude or integrity, and you feel it
Oh, that's
when you read it.
interesting.
It's just a vacuum. Like,
Modern junk.
yes, but it's easy to read. So I take the easy road. We are not going to cover a listener question today because we're saving those up for a mailbag episode, but we want your questions. So email podcast@memoriapress.com and ask us anything, and we will try to answer it on that mailbag episode or in a later one. So what are we reading? It's summertime.
I started Horatio Hornblower, Midshipman
Did you?
Hornblower.
It's good, isn't
for
it?
you.
Yeah.
You're going to like
I'm
it.
gonna listen to the first one, see how I like it, and then I'll probably like go get the books because I wanted something to like read at night, and so I just want to see how the first one goes, and then I'll probably like it because there's a whole series.
I have a Sabatini that I don't know that you've read that Martin grabbed out of his trunk for one of our Christmas episodes several years ago, and I haven't read it
yeah,
yet.
you complained about it. Now you're
Right, but
reading
it's a title that I don't recognize, so I should bring that to you.
Is it The Hounds of God?
No. I can't remember the name of it now. I saw it on my shelf. I haven't read it. I also haven't read the book you gave me 2 Christmases ago. And I haven't read the book you gave me. Wow.
We should just stop giving her books until she's ready.
Well, you know, I started feeling the same way because I hadn't read a whole bunch. That's why I started reading Independent People because Mitchell gave me that for Christmas years ago. I still haven't read the book you gave me. Just gave me, what was that book? It's
A
on my
Severe
shelf.
Mercy.
A Severe Mercy.
We at Memorial College had a class on that.
I know.
Do you remember that?
I know,
It's a
Jess.
really good class. It's a good book.
It's
There's
worth
yes.
reading.
So I started
remarkable.
trying to get through, like in the focus times, the books that people have given me. And
So the one
just to
that I've
catch
got
up.
that you gave me is about a woman looking at a snail.
but
that
that's
one.
good.
Yes, that's
That's
good.
really good. I've read that and I enjoyed it. What's it? I forget.
I'm
I
going
gave
to
it to
grab
both of
them
you.
out.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
You could
You
read
read
it. In a
it. I
weekend.
didn't.
I did.
I put it
liked
on my
it.
shelf.
What's the
I'm
title
probably
again?
going
The
to-
sounds of a wild snail eating.
So I'm
liked it.
reading, I finished Bloomsbury Girls, which I talked about last week, and I think I sounded a little iffy about because I had just started it. It's very modern, but it is set in 1950, but you know, it's a modern reading, just a
You'd have done better to go
easy.
get a 1950s book written in 1950.
Well, and I have read Testament of Youth by Vera Brittain, which would be my go-to novel about life. But that one really is about life. A young woman who lives through both wars and works through both wars, and just how they lost their youth. But, you know, all those people in her generation, because we went from one war to another, and just so much loss. That was serious. This one is entertaining. But it's after the war. And really, again, I seem to be on this theme lately because I read Anne Bronte, and now I've just read this book, which is really, again, about the plight of woman and how, women were in charge of things like bookstores, and then the men came back, and then that relegated women where they had gotten used, to having some leadership and some, and having incentives, to work hard. And then the men came back and said, no, you go away again. And so, that's a major theme of it, and how these women persevere and finally buy their own bookstore. Spoiler. But now I'm reading C.S. Harris's latest British murder mystery about Sebastian St. Cyr in the early 1800s, which it's like book 20. I've read them all. I love them. And somebody at a homeschool convention, the one in Ohio, said that she had read one of those books because she heard me mention it on the podcast, and she realized now that she loves British murder mysteries.
Well, there's one person out there.
I'm influencing people toward British murder mysteries.
There's not a single book she mentioned that I have any inkling of.
Well, remember, I haven't read any of the books that you've given me in the past 3 years.
Well, yeah.
So there's that. But then there's always
to you.
Yeah.
Out of your trunk.
Yeah. I got books in my trunk, but I'm not giving them to you.
What are you reading, Martin?
I can't remember if I mentioned this last time, but I went back.
Last time you talked about Hamlet.
Right. Okay. Well, so I was going to talk about Shakespeare again too. But somebody had put a really nice copy of Edith Hamilton's Mythology.
Oh, yes.
On my desk.
They came by mistake. We didn't order them, and it was a whole box of them, so Sarah just passed them out.
And she didn't give me one, so I then guilted Martin into giving me his.
Yeah, well, so I'm thinking, now I know I've read this book before at some point, I think, started maybe, and it's probably got my markings in it. And if I just go and replace it with this one, I won't want to do that because this is such a beautiful book. I don't want to mark in it. It's just beautiful.
It is pretty
edition of the book. And so I thought, I'm just going to give this copy to Paul. So I go and I set it over, and he was so thankful. I just felt like I had done my good deed.
You must not have been here when she was handing them out.
She came over and handed Martin one.
Oh, and
then she walked
out. Yeah.
Okay.
And so then I went home. And the one on my shelf was unmarked, and it was that exact same edition. So I'm thinking, this is my reward.
That's right.
For being so
That's
good
right.
and generous. So I am marking in it now. But that is because I realized that we have Delaire's Great Mythology in our program and all that, and I'm sure there's other things we do at different points. But I never got a good. I never did a good study of mythology. And I love Edith Hamilton. The Greek Way and the Roman Way are among the two best classical books I think I've ever read. So I thought, well, I'm gonna try this. So I read about the first part was each of the gods. So I've just been reading one a day and marking it. And now we're getting into the lesser gods. So I'm learning about that. But it's just it's such a study in humanity because these are all the different all the different kinds of humans, all the different aspects of humanity in here. And that's the way you kind of have to look at Greek literature. Or you're Christian, you're studying the gods. Well, these were just projections from people who didn't have a direct divine revelation. And this is what's coming up from below.
It's that God-sized hole.
Yeah.
Who said that?
Probably Lewis, maybe.
Lewis, Chesterton.
Christianity. I think that's maybe.
Oh, maybe it is.
And then after I had to read
I think
Hamlet.
it was Pascal.
Oh, it could be. It could be. And then I'm also reading. I'm going back to Shakespeare because I had to read Hamlet for a podcast that we were doing for the college, and I realized I need to do this more often. I used to be more diligent in my. I used to have more fortitude in my reading of certain things. So I need to get back to Shakespeare. And so I just literally started from the volume of complete works I bought. And there's like letters from people commending to the king this volume that they're giving him and all this stuff. So I'm just reading everything from the very beginning and just moving on, and it's plays as they were written. So the first one
in the order in which they were written?
In the order in which he wrote the play. So I'm just going to read a scene a day.
In college, we did them by genre. All the histories, all the comedies. Yeah. Be interesting to read them chronologically.
Yeah, that's a different way of doing it.
Well, moving right along, today we are digging into literary characters with fortitude. So to start, how would each of you define fortitude?
I'll start because my definition is so simple. I just define it as courage.
In action.
Courage in action. Well, I guess. What would be courage not in action?
True. Yeah. Is fortitude, well, yeah. Okay. So you would say courage.
I would. I mean, I guess I'm confused about what you mean by inaction. I don't mean courage like bravery, fighting with the sword. I just mean, just courage to keep getting up day after day. If you're grieving or, I just see, of course, because my husband was a minister, I've just seen all kinds of things, and I've seen how people deal with awful things. Yeah. And many of them, especially the older generation, and maybe it is because they lived through those wars, lived through the Depression, but they have such fortitude in the face of awful things happening.
Almost like some endurance in there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that's not really, is that active?
Oh, I think so.
Okay. Then yes, courage in action.
Paul?
I mean, I would agree with that. I think it's interesting to look at the etymology coming from fortis, right? To be strong, right? And so that's I think something that an element of looking at fortitude that, sometimes we can look at an action and it, in some ways, that action may imply humility to other people, right? Or taking on a lowliness, but it does require strength to do that. So that could be an action of fortitude.
That would be Jesus, right?
But we all try to imitate that.
Yes, but I mean, that is our ultimate example.
Right, like the crucifixion is an act of fortitude, like accepting the passion and
the garden.
Death. The garden, that is an act of fortitude.
Yes.
Even though it was an act of humiliation because it required tremendous strength.
Well, and I think I think courage sort of captures more the classical idea of, I mean, it's the way, the word virtus, it's the way the Romans, I think, would more conceive of it. Whereas fortitude is, I think, the more maybe Christian, medieval sense of the word. And I think that partly comes from the fact that, and we could use the expression moral strength, I think here, that courage is a more active sense of this particular virtue, whereas fortitude is a little bit more passive in that sense. And I think some of that
well, it is interesting though, because is it like an internal anchoring, or is it? Yeah.
Well,
I think it's both.
Okay, so I think we need to think of it in the sense of martyrdom. Okay, so fortitude would be what you would practice in the early church, where you're not going out and trying to fight the pagans. You're trying to stand for what you believe, and you're paying a cost for it, and you stand anyway. I think that's more of a medieval Christian sense of that word. So I think because courage is the word you often hear when you're listening to an account, the classical account of the four cardinal virtues, of which this is one. And you don't hear fortitude. I don't hear fortitude as much.
I would have to go actually look up the etymology of courage, and obviously there's a C-O-U-R in there, but I mean, it just speaks to me of cor cordis, which is the heart in Latin, right? And so I'm just, maybe the distinction is like the heart is more allied with passions and sort of more of this passionate going versus a fortitude, which is just strength, but there can be a quiet strength that's not necessarily requiring you to constantly go out.
Yeah, that would make sense.
But even using Frodo as an example, even then, so was it Frodo that didn't want to go? If I got my books mixed up, because I get my, Lord of the Rings isn't my thing. Is he the one that loved home? No, that was Bilbo. Loved home, didn't want to leave his hobbit hole. Oh, and Gandalf had to just force him to go. That was the Hobbit, right?
That was Bilbo. Yeah.
So Bilbo then, he did it. He went, but he went unwillingly, and so it felt to me less. I think it was fortitude because he did it, but I don't know that he had that inner strength. I think he would have not left if Gandalf hadn't pushed him out the door and kept him actively doing whatever he was supposed to do, because he was afraid all the time, but he did it. He did it. So
yeah, and I think sort of like in that scenario, the question is whether, like, when he confronts a troll or whatever, does he curl up in a fetal position,
right,
or does he say, "All right, well, like my opportunity here is I can freeze, I can run away, or I can fight," and I think what Bilbo constantly is doing, like, he's in groups,
he's able to call upon himself, upon his inner strength, not to be a coward,
right.
And not to run and not to freeze. I'm a freezer. Well, I don't think I have a lot of fortitude.
There's some
in
resolve
an emergency, I'll just stop.
Yeah. There's some resolve of personhood that fortitude calls forth.
Yes, that is really admirable.
Well, and the hobbits seem to have this underlying strength. They love home, so they don't want to go off on a quest, really.
But loving home is not a weakness.
That's right.
They've got this strength.
That's right.
And that's why they're befuddling the entire Middle Earth, especially like their resistance to the ring is like you've got this strength, but we don't see it, right? I mean, that was the big thing where, like, in the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, like, Gandalf doesn't realize that it's the ring for years that Bilbo's got in his possession, because it just doesn't affect Bilbo the way it affects everybody else.
Right.
Because he's a hobbit. But like there is this sort of quiet strength there. And then Frodo does have the resolve to say, I'll go to Mount Doom. Right. Like, and it's very clear he doesn't fully understand what he's taking on.
Right. Well, and in fact, the innocence and the simplicity of them makes them do courageous things more easily, because they probably just don't even conceive of how big a battle they've got in front of them, because they're just simple. They're more simple.
Well, and that's where you get into sort of a perversion of fortitude is rashness, right? I mean, like courage, you can be a coward or you can be rash, and somehow that rashness seems to indicate also like a lack of prudence, right? But I would say the hobbits, it's not that they're not knowingly rash or desirous of being ignorant in order to make bad choices.
Right.
It's just not it's just not something that they know of, right?
And a lot of times rashness works. People that are risk takers do really well in war, or did. I mean, now war's not person to person, but when it was, and somebody would go flying out to the front, a lot of times I guess back to Lord of the Rings, that's what Aragorn did.
Yeah, but also, like, I mean, Pickett's charge is a little bit of rash, and it didn't go well, right? Like,
well, I mean, yes, obviously it can go the other direction, right, but sometimes it actually works. So, that's not necessarily fortitude, though. That's just literally.
It is. I think it is. I mean, I think it would be for the Romans. For the Romans in particular,
it would be.
I mean, because you have to do battle, actual military battle,
right?
And so part of courage or fortitude, in their sense, is to steel yourself for what you're going to have to do, right? But you mentioned Aragorn, and I was actually thinking about Aragorn because he practices this fortitude, the kind of passive fortitude I was kind of talking about before, of waiting. Mm-hmm. He's got to wait and wait for he knows his time is coming, but the fortitude you have to practice just to restrain yourself for the thing which is so much greater than what you have now. And so I think he's an admirable character because of that kind of passive fortitude, courage too. But I mean, and that's just the other side of this virtue we're talking about.
So are you saying that patience, is a prerequisite of patience is fortitude?
Yeah. Well, I think the difference between the sense that you find in courage and the sense that you find in fortitude is that fortitude is more of a restraint, whereas courage has this greater sense of, getting yourself ready for battle, that kind of thing, to do something, not to not do something. I think those are both different aspects of this virtue.
I would say though, I would think that fortitude actually includes both ideas.
It does. I'm just saying that the senses of those two words, which are describing the same virtue. Yeah. Again, one's a little more active in its sense, and the other is a little more passive.
And Martin wanted to sidestep my question about patience, and that's okay. I'm ready to move on.
That's my passive sense of fortitude.
I do think patience has a role in fortitude, but I don't think, because I think back to, the people that I've watched who have been really strong in continuing on in with great grief, that does take patience, because you do recognize that this life is limited and that it's not going to be perfect, and we just have to patiently wait for perfection.
And there's a sense too that inner strength in the face of adversity is patience and fortitude. If that's what we're talking about,
there's a piece of it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we go back to the origins of words, passio, which is to be acted upon, as opposed to actio, which is to act. And what I was trying to say before the fortitude has both those senses to it.
Sure.
Right. And patience is
patient. The word patience is from passio, to be acted upon.
Can we think of some other examples of fortitude? I know you mentioned a couple from Lord of the Rings. Anything else come to mind?
To be on a Lord of the Rings.
I know.
So you have Jane Eyre in front of you.
I do.
Why don't we talk about Jane Eyre?
I love Jane Eyre. I've been drawn to this book in the last week or two because I just finished my book club's book of the month, and the lead character had absolutely no integrity, no fortitude, and it just was a slog to get through the book. And at the end, when we had our book club discussion, I just said, I want someone with integrity. I want someone with fortitude. And the first person that came to my mind was Jane Eyre. Especially, which I mentioned before we started recording, the scene toward the end when she finds out that Rochester is married, and he says, Jane, live with me, come away with me.
Right. Because my wife she's crazy. She's never coming out of it. Nobody's going to know.
Yes. And I reread, there's a paragraph that I think is just one of those moving paragraphs I've ever read, where Jane says, even if no one cares for me, I will not go against my integrity.
Right.
No matter what. And then I got to thinking, is that piety? We just talked about that a couple weeks ago. Or is it fortitude?
I think it's both.
Right? Okay.
I think it's absolutely both, because because she loves him as much as anybody could love someone. And the only reason she won't marry him is because she feels like that is morally wrong, because it would be committing bigamy and it goes against her faith. And so I think that is the piety, but also just that fortitude of having the strength.
And she says, my veins are on fire.
Yes.
But what I knew when I was sane.
You really feel her pain.
Oh, love it.
You really do feel the pain of making that right decision morally, but one that's going to break your heart.
And I think you could say if she were to have not confronted him, but just ghosted him, you could say
ghosted.
Yeah. That's modern speak.
Yes, it is.
Little
if she took her cell phone out,
I was going to say, if a governess could have ghosted,
block collar, but if she had just disappeared, and you could say that was a pious act because she was doing what she was following her moral compass.
Well, she did do that. She did disappear after she talked to him.
Yeah, but I'm saying without talking to him, right? Then there would have been, you would say there is probably some fortitude in the sense that she was able to continue on in the situation. But the fact that she's willing to confront him in this moral quagmire actually speaks to a greater degree of fortitude, I think, than if she had. Yes. And that's our society's predilection with ghosting probably speaks to a lack of fortitude.
That's right.
Right. We are not willing. We do not have
we just cut off relationships instead of
to confront the person and say, I this is not okay.
Because, and what's interesting is fortitude requires the ability to tolerate discomfort or to tolerate ambiguity in ways that at least maybe my generation loves to get out from underneath. And probably even younger generations, it's like, ooh, that doesn't feel good. I'm not going to do it at all. No one's going to make me. I'm going to say no. I'm going to not have that conversation. I'm going to forget I got that text, whatever it is. But you're right. I think there is an aspect of fortitude where you are able to tolerate unusual strain on things that we would like to just say, nope, I don't want to do that.
How about, let me throw another one out. The Scarlet Letter. Does Hester Prynne have fortitude? Does Dimsdale have fortitude?
Been a while since I read that one.
Oh, okay.
I can't get into the details. Well, I think that's a fascinating one to talk about, but I don't know the details well enough to be able to argue that.
Okay, well, I think they both do, actually. Dimsdale, not as much as Hester. Dimsdale is, Hester is wearing that A, taking her punishment. Dimsdale has hidden, he has hidden his role in things, but he's unable to live with himself because of the actions, because of his sin. He can't live with himself, but he can let Hester live publicly.
Yeah, I feel like he's got no fortitude. She's the one.
Do you have an example? Like, where's a scene in the book where he would have?
Where he has? Well, I think his fortitude is just his inability to forgive himself and his inability to live a normal life. He doesn't just throw it out. He gets up on that scaffold with one night. He's just standing, like he's punishing himself so drastically. This is really, his role is very it's complicated.
His emotional world and
just what, how you would deal with him and what is he a person of fortitude? Hester's easier because she's obviously got the courage to do it, not to deny it. Of course, it's hard to deny when you're carrying somebody else's child. But I think she's a clear example for students. Dimsdale is not clear, but that's a great thing. It's good for characters not to be clear. What about Anne of Green Gables? Who, you all tell me, who's on your mind that would be a character from literature?
I keep going back to
great
the Roman history. That's what I keep going back to, because that's,
everybody in Famous Men of Rome practically.
Yes. That's because that's the Roman virtue, right? Like this is what they're known for. But even, not in Famous Men of Rome. We don't talk about Spartacus in Famous Men of Rome, do we?
Mm-mm.
But just the scene in Spartacus after the battle, where the Roman general comes through and he's like, which one of you is Spartacus, right? Because Spartacus is a slave rebellion. And he says, which one of you is Spartacus? And all of them start saying, I am Spartacus, right? And they're all willing to take the fall because they know that he's, but they want the rebellion to continue. And they know that he's key to that, but they're all willing to step up and take his spot. And that is just, I mean, it was just a scene of like just tremendous fortitude and in the face of oppression, that they're all willing to go, well, every one of us will sacrifice our lives.
So what happened?
I think they all get crucified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, have you not seen that movie?
No, and I'm not going to watch it now.
This is one of the greatest movies on the classical age that has ever been. And it's this, because it's Sir Laurence Olivier.
Oh, wow.
And Kirk Douglas. Olivier is playing Crassus. He's a Roman nobleman. And Kirk Douglas is playing Spartacus. And apparently it was not originally this way until... when they were making the movie, until Olivier pushed this, but basically elevating both characters to leads. And what it did was it created this contrast between order, represented by Rome, and freedom, represented by this freed slave. And it was this battle between order and freedom. And in the end, order wins in the plot line. But in terms of the dignity of Spartacus's character, he wins. And Gene Simmons plays a slave girl.
Gene Simmons from Kiss?
No.
That's what I was picturing.
Sorry.
Like, wow.
I thought Gene Simmons was in Kiss.
The Gean Simmons, the great actress from
I don't know.
But anyway, but both of them are contending for her, So this is great. The symbolism in this movie is just excellent.
Did you say G-E-A-N?
He means J-E-A-N.
I said J-E-A-N.
Okay.
I got him confused with
anyway,
my Kiss reference.
In each one,
80s rock.
But I think that's a great example of Fortitude is that movie. That's one of my favorite movies. I can still see the end.
We should do a movie.
Does Spartacus get crucified too?
Oh, yes. Yeah. At the end, that's the scene at the end.
Wow. But they are heroes.
But they're heroes.
Yeah.
And you know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you very yeah.
The last scene is absolutely beautiful and absolutely crushing.
Yeah.
Which is perhaps that is fortitude.
I think it is.
Because there are probably many, many examples where it does not work out in your favor.
That's right. Joan of Arc.
Right.
Bonhoeffer. I mean, they're all
that's
through.
Exactly right.
You mentioned martyrdom at the beginning as being a part of that. I mean, that's where we see it probably
that's right.
because we know those people are willing to go all the way.
That's right.
All the way.
But at the same time, right, like what we're trying to teach students and seeing example after example after example of fortitude is for example, you mentioned Anna Green Gables. We didn't talk about it, right? Like her decision to stay and take care of Marilla requires strength on Anne's part.
Oh goodness, yes.
To be able to sacrifice everything she wants for the person who's sacrificed a lot for her, right? And and
do it cheerfully,
right? Yeah, and so to have students see like great examples where yes, people died because of what they stood for, but also to have examples of here's just somebody living their daily life and they've got to make a decision that sidelines their own desires and goals, but that is an act of strength. And to have that model, I think is one of the main goals that we're trying to present these characters to the students.
Right. I thought you were going someplace else with that because I was thinking as you were talking, I thought that you were going to bring up The Great Gatsby, that we also are showing students examples of people with no fortitude.
Oh, no, I wasn't thinking that. But no,
okay.
You've been thinking about The Great Gatsby a lot more than I have recently. So
I have because I had to reread it again.
Yeah.
And I think my Western novels are great examples of this. These are our
Western novels.
Yes, the ones I'm always bringing up.
The genre only Martin can enjoy.
Yeah, because again, this is our great epic. This is the American epic, was Conquest of the West, and you have in these Western novels, the heroes are usually people they have to be tough. They have to not only restrain themselves. But also work up the courage to do what it takes to go out into this land and tame it. And so all those novels, the protagonist is usually some kind of character who has to overcome some obstacle through fortitude.
Well, I was going to say that, because I've recently said I'm reading more Louis L'Amour short stories as I go to sleep. And as I'm sitting there thinking about them, there's never, at least Louis L'Amour is never presenting the cowboy that is the protagonist that's fighting for what's right as ever waffling. They always know what is right, and they fight to make that happen. And that's an interesting thing, is like fortitude in those stories is like a given. Mm-hmm. It is not
not a conflict.
It's not a conflict.
And there are other characters in there who are not that way. But,
correct.
But you are in the mind of a character with moral strength. And I think this is, I'm doing some writing on virtue in the general sense and talking about how you learn that. You learn that by being in the mind of you learn morality by being in the mind of a moral character. That's how you learn it, and you imitate that. And, when those novels used to be very popular, that was the kind of literature boys read, and they learned how to be what moral strength, they learned what moral strength was by reading those novels. And you're in the protagonist's mind, and you're learning how he thinks, and you realize the implication is I should think that way too. That knowing right from wrong and practicing the moral strength to hold for the right.
Yeah, watching people who've just strengthened the muscle of fortitude over a lifetime.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. That metaphor you used.
Watch out, he'll steal it.
Yes, he will.
We're going to see that in an episode or
next time he does a speech at a homeschool convention.
Or in the magazine, there's going to be.
You heard it here first. Jess came up with the metaphor.
That's right. And, Martin, it's interesting that you bring up the moral strength, because it does come from something deeper than just willpower. When we're exhibiting fortitude, to Paul's first point, we're imaging the likeness of God in many ways. To your example of Christ's passion, it's something. It's not just willpower. It's not just grit. It's something deeper.
Well, you said imaging, and I was thinking of the word imagination, and how important imagination is to moral training, because you need to be able to see yourself as other people see you. And when you're thinking about doing something, you need to be able to take yourself out of yourself and think, what would this look like? What would this action of mine that I'm about to take? Maybe you're contemplating a wrong one. What does that look like to somebody else? And reading and stories, this is what stories do, is they enable you to practice that, to practice seeing somebody from the outside, because you're seeing the character from the outside. And later on in life, you'll be going along and you'll be saying, okay, so if I'm the character in the story and the story's about me, what would, and somebody's written a book about it, what would that look like to somebody who's reading the book? It's just a part of moral development, but it's the imagination. The imagination is key in that, I think.
Did we leave anything out about fortitude? We didn't cover. I
don't know. I was
a lot
just
of good
trying
characters
to,
in there.
Bring up some books, but all I could get out of them was movies. So
it's true.
Would you like to talk about a couple more books?
No,
we got it. We covered it.
For our listeners, Tanya has like a whole list of books, like 20 books probably.
But everything I mentioned, y'all were like, I haven't read that lately.
That was one. That was Scarlet Letter. That was one. No, but I mean, it is peppered throughout the curriculum. I mean, almost every book, it's easy to find an example of fortitude.
And all the different grades, like to Martin's point, there are so many.
Even
books
starting in the read aloud.
Yeah, they're little and they're reading.
Yes,
stories. Yeah. Well, thanks for a great discussion, guys, on fortitude, and thank you for joining us. We'll be back next time. Thanks for joining us today on Classical Etc. by Memoria Press. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share this episode or comment. We love to hear your questions and your comments. If you want to learn more about Memoria Press, please go to memoriapress.com. This has been Classical Etc. We're so glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.